I'm Shaun Howe, and tonight we're going to discuss our wonderful God. The God who made the heaven and the earth with thy great power and stretched out arm. Specifically, the topic I'm going to talk about tonight is his wonders in space, in the heavens. We're going to explore space through a biblical perspective, and we'll see that the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. We'll also look at how vast and beautiful the cosmos is, and how it really, truly bears the mark of its creator. And we'll also refute anything that says otherwise. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of heaven to divide the day from the night, and to let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of heaven to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the fourth day. The Bible says God made the cosmos on the fourth day of creation. Today, people are trying to take away the glory from God and give it to random, mindless chance. The fact is, something this majestic and complex cannot come about by random, mindless chance, despite how much they insist it did. See, the Bible told us this would happen too, because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God. Neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, and to birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things. If you really study science, it will bring you closer to God. Nothing we learn about the universe threatens our faith, it only enriches it. So true. So let's take a deeper look into the brilliant design of our universe. And I apologize now for those who were at my last message, there's a good amount of recycled material. See, secularists say that the universe burst into something from nothing, and expanded to form all the stars and planets and life and etc. Well, why do they think this? Because they don't like the idea of God telling them what's right and what's wrong. So if they can convince themselves in their own minds that all that which was and which is to come came about by random chance, then there's no God to tell them the rules. The fact is, God is the only thing which is and which was and which is to come. See, even though most of these scientists have more degrees than Fahrenheit, no one can come close to even imagining a way in which the universe can form without God. The best guess they have, they call the Big Bang. They say, first off, nothing exploded. We're going to go through real fast. They say nothing exploded. It made the first elements, hydrogen and helium, the simplest. Those made stars. The stars made heavier elements. The heavier elements made planets. Chemicals on these planets made single-cell life, and that eventually evolved into you. And it gives you that warm, fuzzy feeling inside. But where's the evidence of all this? There isn't any. There's lies. That's all. Some of you science lovers out there may have already thought of a few supposed evidences for the Big Bang. Best one being probably the cosmic microwave background, often used as the best evidence for the Big Bang. What it is a very faint field of microwaves all over space. It is 2.7 degrees above absolute zero. It's very cold. And in reality, it does fit their theory. But the thing is, it'll fit just about any theory. Probably the best prediction the Big Bang has ever made, it's really the only one I know of that ever came close to reality. When this was discovered, there were many theories around that predicted this, like I mentioned. And the Big Bang predicted it would be anywhere in the range of 1 degree above absolute zero to 50 degrees. Not terribly accurate. This is a vague prediction. Like if I said, I have a theory that predicts on your way home, you'll see a car. Then on your way home, you find another car. And I'll say, I told you my theory's right, and then you'll give me a stupid look, and I'll wonder why. If I said, however, on your way home tonight, you'll see an elephant on the road, and you do, then I'll say, told you my theory's right, and you'll be impressed. Same kind of thing. Am I making sense? Also note, nothing about the cosmic microwave background, or CMB, contradicts the creation model in any way. In fact, it may be another argument for it. See, as far as I can tell, the presence of God, as far as we can perceive in our dimension, is energy, like heat or light. For example, God appeared to Moses as the burning bush. He led the Jews out of Egypt with a pillar of fire. He appeared to Moses on the top of Mount Sinai, which we can actually go find Mount Sinai and find out that the top is horribly scorched. So there was fire there too, or some sort of energy. God made light in Genesis 1:3. In order to work with the matter, he needed some type of energy to be able to maneuver things, because it specifically says in Genesis, some things were made from nothing, other things were made from pre-existing material. See, in my mind anyway, perhaps the CMB is proof that God is in fact omnipresent. He is the energy that is everywhere at all times. Just a thought. Scoffers often point out the distant starlight problem. What it is, they say they see stars billions of light years away, so therefore it took the light billions of years to get from the star to here. And I'll cover that in a minute, but first let me point out they have a distant starlight problem too. Actually, a couple. One called the horizon problem. What it is hard to explain, so bear with me. But it says energy from stars, light from stars, could not have reached across the entire known universe, even with billions of years to do it. And the CMB is cosmic microwave background, is nearly perfectly uniform temperature, so it's not adding up. Let me illustrate. We start with a cup of water, and we add food coloring, and 30 seconds later, it looks like that. We'll see. I don't know how long that actually took, but 60 seconds later, it looks like this. The thing is, they only have 30 seconds, but their cup is already all green. Make sense? The second problem they have is we find distant mature galaxies. If it took light billions of years to go from one point to the other, then why are we seeing distant mature galaxies so far away? They should be baby galaxies, because the light is just now getting here from the beginning of the galaxy's formation. Again, not making sense. Now to address the so-called distant starlight problem in the creation model. And this is the one time ever you'll find a use for trigonometry. How they measure starlight, I need to explain this first. How they measure, star distance rather, is they measure where the star is in the sky from a point on Earth, and then 6 months later, when it's on the other side of the sun, they measure the star again. And this makes a very skinny triangle. To explain just how skinny this triangle is, it would be comparable to say if you drew 2 points 16 inches apart, and then drew the third point 8 1/3 miles away. That's the distance from here to Fowlerville, roughly. Not actually far away, but like how far it would take to drive, so it's a little longer. 0.17 degrees out of parallel. Try measuring that on your little plastic protractor. But the angle that this makes measures 1 light year. And they say they can measure stars billions of light years away. I really don't believe that. But we'll go ahead and assume they can, although I doubt it strongly. We'll give them credit for that. That's really not the point. There are many different theories about the distant starlight problem in the creation science community, how to solve the problem, and any one of them would work. So let me just overview them real quick here. Some say, in the past, the speed of light was faster, which is possible. They've done this in labs. They've sped up the speed of light. Also, interestingly enough, the secular Big Bang cosmology model also requires light to be faster in the past. So it's really the same situation. Some, like myself, would say that the speed of light is faster through empty space, because if we measure the speed of light here on Earth, it's bouncing off atoms as it goes through the air. In space, there's little to no atoms, so there's nothing to get in its way, so it's going to go faster. Plus, for all I know, maybe it actually gains momentum as it goes too. I have no idea. Russell Humphreys has a theory that involves all sorts of crazy stuff, bent space, gravity wells. It sounds like science fiction, honestly, but it's based on good science. His whole idea is that gravity affects time, and that's true. You can measure that. If you put a real accurate clock on sea level and then another one on a mountaintop, after a year, I think you get like a 3 millisecond difference. And perhaps the simplest explanation, 17 times through the Bible, it says that God stretched out the heavens. So that would make the question different. Rather than how did the light get from the star to the earth, it's how did the star get from the earth to where it's at now. That's a totally different question to ask. Anyway, back to the origins. The stars could not have formed out of gases collapsing in on themselves because of Boyle's gas law. This is a proven scientific law. It says when gases compress, heat and pressure drives them back apart. They won't collapse in on themselves. This force is much stronger than gravity, and therefore gas cannot collapse to form anything. That was a really easy way to ruin their theory right off the bat. Also, if it all came from a Big Bang, why isn't matter evenly distributed throughout the universe? There are clumps of stars and galaxies and things, and then gigantic distances between them. That doesn't quite make sense. As far as planets are concerned, they say the material floated around in this little cloud and it made dust, and the dust made basically dust bunnies like you find under your bed, and that's true, that'll happen. And then, even in the right situation, some of those dust bunnies can even make small pebbles, but that's where it stops. At this point, when they slam into each other, they won't stick together, they'll smash apart. Let me illustrate. They don't stick together. Remember that in your head. Next time someone tries to argue. Once these planetesimals, or space rocks, asteroids, whatever you want to say, it's the same thing, have been formed, further growth of the planets may occur through their gravitational accretion into large bodies. Just how that takes place is not understood. That's from a textbook. That's what they're teaching people. This is exactly what science is reduced to when you eliminate God from the equation. See, the solar system bears the mark of its brilliant designer in two basic ways. One, the simple impossibility that how complex and how perfectly everything works, it just couldn't have come about by chance. And also, just the awe-inspiring beauty in everything there is. Even the most simple things are just, to me anyway, absolutely majestic. Anyway, the solar system has 8 planets. Yes, 8. Give up Pluto. Almost all of them have moons. Some have a ridiculous amount of moons. And let's get started on looking around through the solar system here. Start with the sun. On the surface of the sun, it is 5,000 degrees Celsius. In the center, it's a lot more. And the sun's burning up quick. It's burning off about 5 million tons per second, or 5 feet an hour. When you run the math backwards on this, you find out 4.6 billion years ago, when the sun was supposedly formed, it would have been 38 billion miles in diameter, assuming the rate has always been the same. The solar system is, we'll say, 2.8 billion miles in diameter. So therefore, at the beginning, the sun would have been 13.6 times the size of the entire solar system. It's a pretty big problem, I think. Moving on, Mercury, first planet from the sun. It's a very small planet, only slightly bigger than our own moon. And it's also very dense, and it still holds a magnetic field, and that's all important. Because a magnetic field requires a molten core. If Mercury were billions of years old, it would have frozen solid long ago. But it's not billions of years old, so it still has a molten core, so it still has a magnetic field. So they're wrong. Also, Mercury is very dense, like I mentioned. Secular science just simply can't explain it. Their best guess is it formed as it should, and it got smashed, and the outer layers broke off and drifted away into space somewhere. Where's the evidence? There isn't any, except for the fact that their theory needs it. Also, I thought they said when objects slam into each other, they stick together. Remember the rocks? I see a little hypocrisy here. I think it's a little funny that this tiny little planet, the smallest one in our solar system, is just simply confounding everything that these PhDs can come up with. And it reminds me, 1 Corinthians 1:27. God hath chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise, and God hath chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things that are mighty. So true. Next, Venus. Said to have formed in the same way as Earth, sometimes called our sister planet. So therefore it should be pretty similar to Earth, right? Well, Venus has no water. In fact, it rains sulfuric acid there. Carbon dioxide atmosphere, 90 times the pressure of our atmosphere. 900 degrees Fahrenheit, no magnetic field, and no moon. Not a sister planet. By the way, guess why there's no moon? It got smashed. That's the solution for everything. Something else interesting about Venus, even secular science will admit it has a very young surface, appearingly very young surface, due to small amounts of erosion and chemical weathering. Their solution? About 500 million years ago, the entire planet was resurfaced by volcanic activity. Meaning the entire planet was all under lava flow. Why? We don't know. That's their best guess. I got a better guess. God made the heavens and the earth about 6,000 years ago. But anyway, moving on. Earth. I could talk for weeks on all the things in Earth, but we don't have weeks. I think someone might get hungry. So we're just going to talk about Earth as a planet real quick here. First off, the magnetic field is declining. People will say, yes, it's declining now, but it's going through a pattern of reversals. It's getting stronger and it's getting weaker. No, it's not. See, reversals don't happen. When they say they find magnetically aligned rocks at the bottom of the ocean trenches, which is what they'll tell you, they're lying. They're not finding magnetically aligned rocks. They're finding jumbled up rocks that are just completely blown to pieces. Because that is most likely where the fountains of the deep broke open in the time of the flood. It's logical to assume that the place would be destroyed. And even if you don't believe me about that, I mean, it really doesn't matter, because even if the poles were flipping, it really makes no difference, because that's not going to make the fields stronger. Just because a magnet flips doesn't make it stronger. Earth has been observed to lose 10% of its magnetic strength in the last 150 years, and 40% in its last 1,000 years. It's burning out fast. And the magnetic field, if you run the clock backwards, about 25,000 years ago Earth would be uninhabitable, because of the amount of heat generated by the magnetic field would kill anything that tried to live here. Also, here on Earth, we have a lot of water. Water is a volatile element. It's made up of hydrogen and oxygen. It should not have been able to condense this close to the sun in their little spinning gas cloud model. And they saw this problem. They originally said all the water came here by comets. All the ice from the comets came down, smashed into us, and added all the water little by little. And that was a good theory until someone actually went up to a comet and tested what it has on it. And the composition of a comet ice, is very different than the composition in water on Earth. For example, comets have a lot of deuterium, where Earth has next to none. So we didn't get our water from comets. Also, I'd like to point out, why did only Earth get all these comets? I mean, especially Venus. Venus is supposed to be our sister planet, right? Where's its oceans? Where did we get our moon? There's a lot of old theories about where the moon came from. The fission theory, the nebula theory, the capture theory. And those have all been disproven, even by secular scientists, so I'm not going to argue them, because everyone agrees they're wrong now. Guess what the newest theory is? It says that something enormous came and smashed into Earth and knocked a chunk off, and now that's the moon. This obviously has a lot of problems. For one, the different composition. The moon is made of a very different material than the Earth, and they said they fixed that because all the iron was like magnetized to the middle of the Earth or something. I don't know, it sounds kind of crazy to me. But whatever. The most important thing, really, is just the implausible conditions of it. They say they need something exactly the right size to hit Earth, roughly the size of Mars, coming in exactly the right angle, at exactly the right speed, which happens to be very slow, basically bump into us. And even then, it's still questionable if it would work or not. And also, where's the evidence of this? Where's the scar? Also, the moon is drifting away, a couple centimeters per year. It's not a big deal, and it's not like you can do anything about it anyway, but if you run the clock backwards on this, you find out it could have only been out there about 1.4 billion years at most. And yet they say the Earth is 4.6 billion years old. So I think they need to get their story straight a little bit. In fact, speaking of stories, When I was in astronomy class in college, I brought this up to my teacher. His exact response was, "We sweep that under the rug." Isn't it evidence? Sounds to me exactly like 2 Peter 3:5. He is willfully ignorant. He doesn't want to know the truth. See, the moon is amazingly placed because it was placed by an amazing God. It is 400 times smaller than the sun and 400 times closer, making the perfect solar eclipse, which some would call the most amazing natural event. And besides being absolutely breathtaking and beautiful, it actually is a very important thing because it allows us to learn a lot of information about the sun's atmosphere. When you block out the blinding light, you can see the things around the sun. We learned a lot from solar eclipses. Interestingly enough, no other planets have this. We are the only planet that has this exact ratio that allows us to see this. Ironically, the only planet that has someone to see it on. God actually put us in a very specific place in the universe so that we can actually see pretty much all of it. Like if we were like most other places in the universe, really, we wouldn't be able to see much other than a clump of stars in the sky. Next in line, Mars. When you hear about Mars, what is it always about? No one? Okay.
Looking for water.
Thank you for an intelligent response. Yes, water on Mars. Not Martians. Anyway, there certainly is a lot of evidence for water on Mars. And just like Todd said, you hear about it a lot because secular scientists seem to have in their mind that, well, because water on Earth, or life on Earth requires water, then if there's water elsewhere, there must be life, right? Martians. They're kind of obsessed with it. In fact, some secular scientists say that at one point in time, the entire planet, or at least most of the planet, was flooded. Others say these features could have been formed without water. Maybe. I could sort of see how. But the fact is, we have been left probes there, and we find out, at least in some places, there is ice just under the crust. So, personally, I think there was, at one point, vast amounts of water on Mars near the beginning of creation. Because there certainly is a lot of evidence, and some creationists theorize that other planets were made with water under the crust, like Earth. Psalm 24:2 says, "For he hath founded it upon the seas and established it upon the floods." When Earth was formed, there was subterranean water under the crust that allowed everything on the crust, on the surface, to be watered rather than rain. Much better system than we have now, but we live in a cursed world. But I would theorize, based on the fact that we find ice under the crust, that maybe Mars was like that too. It would have eventually leaked out, evaporated very quickly, because Mars has a very thin atmosphere, which is, by the way, just if you're curious, the atmosphere is thin because the magnetic field is weak, and the solar wind is able to come by from the sun and scrape away the atmosphere. At creation, Mars may have had a stronger magnetic field, a stronger atmosphere, and it maybe have been a very fertile place. Next, Jupiter. It's a fascinating place. It's enormous beyond all imagination. It has roughly 60 moons, and this enormous planet goes through a full rotation in 10 hours. It is a 10-hour day. That, in and of itself, is a proof of God. Because something that massive should not be spinning that fast. We came to the conclusion that if you accrete planets from a uniform disk of planetesimals, prograde rotation just can't be explained. The simulated bombardment leaves a growing planet spinning once a week at most, not once a day. They can't even explain how we got a planet spinning as fast as Earth, let alone something as big as Jupiter moving 10 hours in a day. See, Jupiter is actually very important. God put it there for a reason. It protects us from incoming comets. Oftentimes, comets will come by Jupiter, or asteroids, come by Jupiter and slam into it. Jupiter shielding us from junk coming in from outside. And if it doesn't directly slam into it, the gravity from Jupiter will pick it up and slingshot it around. One way or the other is protecting us. Very specific purpose for it. And yet interestingly enough, in the secular model, they can't even explain how it got there. it doesn't have enough time for all the gases in that spinning disk to have collected and actually formed Jupiter, even in 4.6 billion years. This is true of Saturn also. Jupiter has some very fascinating moons as well. A lot of them, actually, but we're going to talk about one specifically tonight. Io. Very easy to pronounce. Secular science, saying that everything's 4-ish billion years old, predicts that Io should be old, cold, and dead, like Mercury. The fact is, Io is incredibly geologically active. Here you see a volcano shooting material 180 miles above the surface at 2,000 miles an hour, 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This is one of 400 volcanoes on a little tiny moon, just barely bigger than our own. It's nowhere near dead. Moving on, Saturn. The rings of Saturn, probably the icon of astronomy in itself, and I think a great testament to God's majesty. You see, again, secularists are trying to take away the majesty from God, and guess how they explain the rings? Ta-da. They say a large object smashed into one of Saturn's moons and made the debris and the orbits around now in these rings. See, when I see the rings, I see the hand of my Creator. They're just mind-blowing. And God actually left them with certain features to prove that He made them. These rings have things like braids and spokes through them that no one has any idea how they got there. Saturn also has some fascinating moons as well. One being Enceladus. See that little smudge underneath it on the South Pole? That is a geyser. A massive, massive geyser. Again, Enceladus is not old, cold, and dead. It's still very geologically active, still young, not dead yet. As impressive enough as it is to look at right now, look at it through false color imaging. It's enormous. This geyser is actually so big that it's spray painting neighboring moons with ice and snow. I can't even wrap my head around it. Next is Titan, another moon. You probably noticed it's fuzzy. That's not because it's a bad picture, that's because Titan actually has an atmosphere made up primarily of nitrogen and methane. And methane is the kicker here, because methane is broken down by sunlight into ethane. So if it were billions of years old, it would have to have enormous seas of liquid methane and ethane in order to keep replenishing the atmosphere. When they landed a probe on Titan, they didn't see seas, they saw rocks. What do you know? Now, I'll be fair enough, they have some small lakes, not anywhere near what they would require in billions of years. This is just grossly inadequate to what they need. We're going to look at one more moon of Saturn, actually two. Janus and Epimetheus, often called the dancing moons of Saturn. What they do is while they're orbiting Saturn, they're also orbiting each other. They switch positions every 4 years, so they're dancing around each other while orbiting around Saturn. I think that's just another amazing way that God left us a little reminder of Him in the solar system. It's beautiful. Next is Uranus. Again, everything about it is a testament to its creator. And again, the secular model can't even explain how it got there. Same problem as before, the planetary nebula that has all the gases floating around in a disk, there's not enough time for it all to condense into where Uranus is. Uranus is also interesting because it is the only planet that has a slanted orbit. All the other planets spin like a top while they rotate the sun. Uranus rolls like a ball. You know how they explain that? It got smashed. They say something huge came over and knocked Uranus over. See, I don't think so, because Uranus has one of the most perfectly circular orbits in the solar system. If it got slammed that hard, it'd be moving differently. Also, interestingly enough, all of Uranus rings, or moons rather, all of Uranus moons rotate with it on that slanted angle. The moons couldn't have flipped over with the planet if it got slammed, and the moons couldn't have come along afterwards, so therefore they can't be explained. Another interesting fact about Uranus, it has a magnetic field that's tilted and offset from its rotation. No one can explain why or how, except God. Neptune has a lot of the similar problems as Uranus. Again, not having enough time to form in the nebula. And is not old and dead like the secular model would expect. It's actually one of the most active places in the solar system. It has the fastest wind speeds in the solar system at 1,300 miles an hour. It has multiple large storms. That storm there was taken in 1989. By 94, it had disappeared, and by 95, they found another one. Neptune is very dynamic, very active, nowhere near dead. Neptune, interestingly enough, also has a tilted and offset magnetic field. Same basic thing. Next, I am not going to talk about Pluto, because Pluto is one of many objects out there past Neptune called trans-Neptunian objects, and it's not even the biggest one. We will, however, talk about the TNOs and comets that are out in the area. Secularists say that the comets have been sitting dormant for billions of years in the outer edges of the solar system, on what they call the Kuiper Belt. When they used the Hubble telescope to look at this area, they found a certain region they were going to look through, and they predicted 85 items in the region they searched. The actual results, 3. They're doing a good job. Interestingly enough, also, secular model predicts multiple volatile elements and few silicas in these objects that are floating around out there. They found the exact opposite. Found little to no volatile elements and very large amounts of silicas in these objects. And I know that's thrilling to everybody here, but it really does mean something, because it's interesting that everything they're trying to do is exactly opposite of reality. Another proof of God. Outside our solar system, though we don't know a whole lot, we have a little bit of information, and it's also a testament to a mighty God. Things that defy secularist theories, like, for example, gaseous exoplanets. Exoplanets are planets that orbit around different stars. And the entire nebula theory that they say created all these things was created to explain why the gas giants are so far away from the sun and the rocky planets are so far towards it. Yet they look in the other solar systems, they find big gaseous planets real close to the other stars. So, how'd they get there? Also, interestingly enough, some of the planets orbit in a different direction than their home star rotates. So, if they all came from one spinning disk, tell me how one of them got reversed. I bet if I asked one of them that, they'd say it got slammed. We found a bunch of supernova remnants out there, which are basically just dead stars, stars that have blown up. Interestingly enough, none of them have drifted very far apart from where the star was located. Which, in billions of years, they should have drifted way off by now. But they're all still relatively concentrated. Speaking of blowing up stars, why haven't we run out of stars yet? There shouldn't be any left in billions of years, especially the blue stars. They burn out real fast. And they say, well, there's new stars forming. Well, we already talked about this, Boyle's gas law. They're not forming. They can't form. They don't collapse. Dust doesn't collapse in on itself to form a star. Some really desperate secular scientists say, well, if a star blows up near a cloud of gas, it may compress the gas and form a star out of that. Kind of like magic. There's no observation of anything like this. They're just guessing. To sum it up, I think that all the suggested accounts of the origin of the solar system are subject to serious objections. The conclusion is that the present state of the subject would be that the system cannot exist. When you take God out of the equation, that's what you're left with. A story that says the solar system cannot exist. You see, God made a beautiful universe. And before we close, I want to show you one more thing. It's called the Whirlpool Galaxy. Beautiful in and of itself, just looking at that. When you zoom in real far, right into the center, guess what you see? God left us a mark in the cosmos. Psalm 19:1, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Amen. David said it right. When I consider thy heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars which thou hast ordained. What is man, that thou art mindful of him? And the Son of Man, that thou visitest him. That's all I got for you guys. I'm going to go into Q&A.